Episode 90, magician, entertainer, and storyteller, David Copperfield. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is David Copperfield. David is a magician and entertainer, best known for his combination of storytelling and illusion, and described by Forbes as the most commercially successful magician in history. His illusions have included the disappearance of Learjet, the vanishing and reappearance of the Statue of Liberty, levitating over the Grand Canyon, walking through the Great Wall of China, escaping from Alcatraz prison, and flying on stage. He has received 21 Emmy Awards, 11 Guinness World Records, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a knighthood by the French government, and the Living Legend Award by the U.S. Library of Congress. You can catch him live performing 7 days a week at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. David, I cannot thank you enough for being on this show.
You're welcome.
So, I think I read that you're friendly with David Blaine.
I am.
So I just saw him on a YouTube clip the other day, and by the way, context here, I think he's fantastic, very talented guy, love his street magic, but when I see him, spitting up frogs and holding his breath underwater, and I think 3 days in a block of ice or something like that, which is really cool, fascinating stuff. But it almost feels to me more like endurance stunts than magic. And so I was curious, just your thoughts along those lines. Is that magic, or is this sort of taken it to a completely different level?
I think he does both. He's a very talented magician. He's one of the greats, and he does make a mark for doing endurance things that have nothing to do with magic. They have magic in their own way, metaphorically, but he's a good human being, I think, and terrific performer. So many people in my business copy each other, right? They copy each other. He doesn't. He's somebody that really finds his own path and does it extremely well. So he's one of the greats.
Well, I'm talking to one of the greats right now. And as I was telling you before we launched, I probably saw you in every TV special you had, growing up. Loved every minute of it. And as I was sort of researching for this, relived some of those clips. It was a mix of not just the magic, but sort of a lot of movement and a lot of music and just a lot of things going on. And it would sort of reminded me how you were back then and you are today. I haven't seen your show in Vegas, but way more than a magician. I mean, you were an entertainer, through and through.
I mean, ultimately, we are all storytellers. And what you do, you're a storyteller. When you do your job really good, you're telling stories properly and communicating ideas. I'm a storyteller. I happen to be a magician storyteller. I'm not a singer. God knows if I sing, the audience disappears themselves. But we're all storytellers, whether we're writing books or we're teaching school, or we're, trying to improve the world in our own way. And magic is something that I'm very passionate about, but storytelling is kind of the umbrella over everything.
It's interesting you say that, because I saw that, some of the role models that you looked to when you were sort of growing up and getting into your own, if you will, weren't necessarily other magicians, but, actors, dancers, Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and even Walt Disney, which is really interesting because, you mentioned storytelling. So I've had a few past lives. Chapter number 1, my first job ever out of college was working at Walt Disney Imagineering, which, as you may know, not everybody listening knows, but that's the group at Disney that creates and builds all the parks and attractions.
What did you do there? What was your job there?
Well, I was the boring, finance strategy person, but working on the creative design teams.
Sure.
And in fact, one of the teams I worked on, we worked with someone in the R&D group, and if memory serves, he was one of the world's foremost illusion designers, and I didn't even know that term existed. And I don't know if he worked with you or others.
Well, I've done a number of ideations. Back in your day, were you doing ideation conferences?
Yeah, sure.
So I would come in. Disney brought me in to do a number of years of telling my process, and getting everything right, and the importance of detail, importance of backup plans, importance of making sure things are understandable, making sure things are clear, making sure we're grounded in reality. So when you do something really special, it's even more special because we have a baseline. I do a lot of illusion design myself. A lot of my creations are I think good work. Flying and the Death Saw, and in my show I've got spaceships that appear over the people's heads, giant spaceships, dinosaurs, aliens. I try to take magic in new levels, to not, do just the standard expected things, to really try to, find a new way, which is not unlike what Orson Welles did in his beginnings, what Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire did, moving dance in new areas. Walt Disney did, making not just cartoons, but audio animatronics. I've got a lot of audio animatronics in my show that, hopefully push that forward too, doing magic effects with audio animatronic characters in my live show, all to one goal. The goal is communicate stories that are compelling, that are inspirational, that can, expand how we think about what's possible.
So on that note, when you come up with a new show, do you tend to start with a storyline and then you sort of backfill, well, here's the magic that might go along with it? Or do you start with, oh, this is an amazing illusion I want to come up with. How do I create a story around that and have it come to life?
Similar to the fact that all of the songwriters always will answer that question, which comes first, the words or the music. They'll say it depends, unless you're Elton John will get the music from Bernie Taupin, and he'll write to the music, right? And there'll always be that process. But most songwriters, they'll find a musical phrase or musical lick of music, a little semblance of notes, and that'll be inspired to create words for it. Sometimes they'll have a turn of phrase, a word they want to do, or some idea they want to communicate, and the music comes afterwards. It depends. And that's the way it is for me. In my world, right now, I'm doing things with dinosaurs right now in my show. Giant 30-foot dinosaurs, animatronic dinosaurs, because they're not available in real life. But we're working on illusions with the dinosaurs that I could do right here, and making sure that the magic is as good as the story. My relationship with that dinosaur is important. Every level is important. And I think there's an example that I started with this relationship with a dinosaur, and I've got to do magic to fit that, right? So it wasn't the magic that came first. It was the relationship with me and this dinosaur. And the magic came to do that. Just like the dinosaur is the music, I'm creating the words for that story. If you put in a metaphor of songwriting. But a lot of times you'll come up with a piece of technology. And a lot of what I do is technology, new technology, both my own and other people's new technology that you invent. And you say, how can I use that? How can I use that device to tell the story? If you go back in time to Georges Méliès, if you saw the movie Hugo, the whole movie about its automatons, but also the birth of the cinema. And the cinema was a magic effect. Movies was a magic trick. It wasn't a storytelling thing at all. It was, you go to a magic show and you see a train coming at you. You see a bunch of cows on the thing. And people, whoa, how amazing that is. And Méliès is one of the few to tell stories with it, to tell Cinderella with that medium, that magic technology that was film. And we owe him a lot. That's a magician that started that. So I'm really proud of that. I have his stuff right in that corner up there, lots of his material in this museum. I'm following that path. I find a piece of technology and I think, I can use that for a piece of magic. And then the story will come after it, the effect and what I present to the audience. And then eventually that piece of technology will become public information. And then I'm done. I can't use that piece of technology anymore. Downstairs, we have a talking Buddha. It's a Buddha and it's got a speaker in it. It's from the 1920s and 30s. Nobody knew what a speaker was. But at the time, some genius put a speaker in a Buddha, and you'd select a card, and it'd be 7 of diamonds, and you go up to the Buddha, and the spectator would go up to the Buddha, and the Buddha would say, 7 of diamonds. And people would freak out because they had no idea what a speaker was, no idea. So I'm in that situation today. I'm in the same, I've got technology that eventually will become part of humanity's, process, but I get to use it as something to amaze with for the time being.
Yeah. Well, you know, as we get older, our memories, or at least mine, starts to fade. But, you know, this is, I know, going back decades, but I remember being glued to the TV when you made the Statue of Liberty disappear. And I just remember being mesmerized by the magic itself, by the illusion itself. But then it wasn't until, you know, the last few weeks that I was going back and reliving some of this, and I probably missed it the first time around. But there was a message you had behind that. And the message was that you wanted people to imagine what it would be like without freedom or liberty, which is an incredibly inspiring message. So taking that as an example, was it first, how cool would it be to do this? I think you had before that made a jet disappear, or was there something happening at that time in our country that made you want to do something?
No, it was a combination of a lot of things at the time. You know, I vanished a plane. What am I going to do next? I had no idea a vanishing airplane would have had that much of impact. It did. I was kind of disappointed that vanishing airplane got more of a response and all of the emotional things I was doing on that same show. I thought, you know, you like that? Oh, and I realized the size, scale does matter. You know, size matters in that magic sense. It worked for me, and people talked about it. It was viral before viral existed. It went around the world, that thing. And there was no internet at the time, but people talked about it, and it was an incredible thing. What am I going to do next? So the Statue of Liberty idea was out there. You know, I just found a comic book where Mandrake the magician vanishes the Statue of Liberty. Isn't that amazing? Incredible. Literally. So, you know, it was thought of not just by my circle of people. It existed in comic books before the magician vanishing the statue. And I needed it to be relevant in some way, something that has kind of meaning, because all the other stuff on the special with the airplane had meaning. And that did not. It was just a pure piece of magic. So it was important to me to find that meaning. My mother talked to me about the Statue of Liberty, seeing it, pulling up on the boat, you know, as a 5-year-old child. All that stuff was there. And I went to I went to Frank Capra. Yeah, Francis Capra. Frank Capra. And we collaborated. Frank Capra, who famously, It's a Wonderful Life, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. His company was Liberty Films. I mean, he was very, very into that whole structure of his storytelling. Was something that was very emotional and very, a lot of Americana, and freedom was very important to him. We worked on that. And, you know, I'm glad you got to look at it again and see there was that underlying theme there. It did resound with a lot of people. The people who did the show, which is one of the best television shows ever, The Americans, they remember as a kid seeing that. And they did a whole episode, which the show took place in the 80s when that was done. And you have these Russian spies in America watching this show with their kids and talking about freedom, which was a kind of really wonderful device. So that was kind of in the past few years, to have that illusion remembered again, how it had an impact for the people, certain people at that time.
Well, I don't think there's anyone listening to this who won't know the name David Copperfield. But what I don't know that everyone knows is that you weren't always David Copperfield. And you had changed your name along the way. I think early in your career, your given name, birth name, was Kotkin. You're not the first famous person who have done that. There's like Ralph Lauren, who changed his name, but maybe, you know, Ralph Lifshitz would have been a very strange, you know, brand name, I guess.
I would have bought the stuff. I don't know. Lifshitz is awesome.
Maybe it has a nice little ring to it. But, you know, kidding aside, with Copperfield, did you just think it was a better sounding stage name, or were you attracted to the Charles Dickens character in some way?
I kind of looked as a kid like the drawings in the book. I kind of looked like that, ironically. Ironically, Dickens was a magic aficionado, believe it or not.
Oh.
He was a performing magician, a parlor magician that would use magic in his performance. He wrote long books because he was paid by the page and paid by the word. So the books are very, very long. That was the market at the time. It was written as kind of a group of articles that became stories that got combined to Oliver Twist, to Great Expectations. Anyway, but obviously a brilliant writer and loved magic, was ironic. Had nothing to do with why I chose the name. It was at a time where I thought it sounded okay, you know, probably a mistake. At the end of the day, probably a mistake. I don't regret it, but, you know, I have to now share that with this great writer, Dickens. You know, they made a movie of the Dickens, David Copperfield, and Dev Patel. They tell him, you're going to be reading for David Copperfield. And he told us in interviews that he started doing research on me instead of the book, which is ironic. He was going to read for this part, but he researched on the magician instead of the Dickens character.
Right, right. I knew of your name change. What I didn't know until I started researching for this, the other famous magician came before you that changed his name.
We're in his room, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Over there is all the Houdini section.
Now he changed. He went for a full, first and last name change.
Eric Weiss, yeah.
Invented the last name partially from a French magician, I think, back in the day. And
whose stuff is in the other room, who Méliès started. But Robert Houdin inspired him to change his name to Houdin E with an I at the end, Houdini. But Robert Houdin is actually one of my bigger heroes in the Houdini. Houdini's got the publicity aspect of it, but Houdin was the guy that was the inventor, technology guy, and I'm more inspired by him than Houdini in that way.
Oh, interesting. And you're Jewish, and Houdini was Jewish too. Son of a rabbi, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Was it a Jewish household? Was religion playing a sort of role growing up, or not really?
Not big. I was bar mitzvahed. My mother is from Israel. She was a Sabra, came here when she was 5 years old. We weren't, we wouldn't have been fasting right now if I was a kid. We wouldn't, but we kind of, part of the temple. I went to Hebrew school, all that stuff.
You did?
Yeah. A lot. Yeah, it was, I think my bar mitzvah was a really big turning point in my life. I was a performer at the time, but the idea of learning something new was very scary. And my relatives were very religious. So to do a performance in front of that audience, my Haftorah, the song you sing at the bar mitzvah, was scary. The night before, I had 104 temperature. I had bags of ice all over my body because I was so nervous. But after I did it, I was so proud of doing it. And the party, they called them affairs at the time. So I had an affair. I was 13 years old at that affair. When that stopped, I liked this idea of presenting, working hard, presenting something, getting a nice reaction from people. So I had to find something to kind of satisfy that. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned, because I remember the nerves I had as well when I was bar mitzvahed. And my kids I've got a 20 and a 17-year-old now, but back when they were bar mitzvahed, just walking up there, those nerves sort of resurface, all over again, even though I didn't really have much of a part to play. But yeah, that's a big deal when you're 13. So I read that you were a shy kid to some degree, and magic, this was a way for you to connect with others, and was curious to hear more about that.
Well, I was okay at sports, but I wasn't great. I wasn't a standout. I joined Little League and all that, and I didn't suck that much, but it wasn't, I wasn't going to end up there. But magic was my way of, making me feel special about stuff. It was a thing that I kind of was pretty good at. It came natural to me. Inventing things were very natural. I was inventing magic when I was a kid. I was published when I was 12 years old. One of my inventions was published in a very important magic encyclopedia called the Tarbell Encyclopedia of Magic. So it was like all these moments of encouragement in your life that keep the plate spinning, like a plate spinning act with the pole and plate, little moments that keep it buoyant. You
had some sort of, I think, ventriloquist dummy. Was that the sort of precursor to the magic that you saw? Wow, I'm pretty good at this, and making this thing talk.
I wasn't good at it. Oh,
you weren't?
No, I loved it. I was an only child, so I have my little friend here that I could control. That was a kind of a good thing. I'm sure I didn't have what it took, but people liked it, and they said they liked something. So I said, I'm going to keep doing this in some form. And an allied art to ventriloquism is this magic stuff. Do you remember what was it about the magic itself? I get that it ended up being a nice conduit, but was there something about that drew you? I was good at it. I was good at it. I could think about it. I could be bad at everything else, but I was able to invent new magic and present magic that would make people happy about it. They thought there's something there. And the ventriloquism before that, I was able to do it okay, but I was able to get kind of a reaction from people and said, but I wasn't good. So I found something that I could be, could contribute to. Let's put it that way, contribute to it in an art form that makes people go, wow, magic really makes people go even wow in many different ways, and can brighten that moment. Ventriloquism, you have to be technically good and you have to have good material and have a good relationship with the character. And I was okay, but I couldn't really contribute. Magic, I could contribute. I knew that even at a young age.
Well, I think you later on, just to fast forward, you went to college maybe for a week or two.
3 weeks.
I don't know if that was to appease the parents, but pretty quickly you got offered this huge role in this musical, The Magic Man. First of all, were you going to school because you thought there has to be a plan B, or parents were pushing that on you? And then once you got in this play, was that then you got hooked and then you knew that you're going to find some way to make a career out of this?
You're correct. I went to school for my parents. I did. I think school is great, by the way. I think it's, a very good path. You can get something out of it. So for most people, that's probably the right path, and you could also get relationships and learn about interacting with people, all that stuff you get from that thing. I missed it all. I didn't have that. So I went there for 3 weeks and I went there to make my parents happy. But then I auditioned for a show during those 3 weeks in New York, and I moved to Chicago, and they said, okay, maybe you can make a living at this, performing stuff. A year later, I was starving after that. I was in New York starving, but the fighting spirit, you have to keep moving forward. It's like the speech from Rocky Balboa, and he's talking to his kid and saying, the world's going to give you all this stuff and you're going to keep going. That's my life.
Well, I remember, back to looking at these old clips of yours. It's like there's as much dancing and music and as much of a stage presence, if you will, than the actual magic itself. The magic was incredible, but it almost makes me feel like you're as much of really an entertainer, a showman, as you are a magician, as brilliant as you are as a magician. Is that fair?
Well, thank you. Look, I just looked at everything that was successful and good and that inspired me. And, Barbra Streisand doesn't just sing, she's acting, she's directing, she's producing, all that. Orson Welles, same thing. He's a magician and a filmmaker, storyteller, writer. He's all that stuff. Everybody I looked up to, Gene Kelly, you mentioned, Fred Astaire, didn't just dance. They were doing many other things. They were performing, directing, they understood it. So everybody I looked up to, Walt Disney didn't just do animation. He did Mary Poppins. How do you expand that out? How do you, get into more areas? And anybody who was any good at anything was Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was a fantastic singer, one of the best of all time. But it was much more than that, right? When you came to see him, you'd see him as a human being. You'd see him in movies, Oscar winner, all that stuff. So everybody I looked up to wasn't just a singular focus. It was many different things. And my live show is about my family. It's about aliens, about time travel. It's not just about, I'm going to fool you with this card trick.
Yeah. Well, I read that you like to make audiences feel something in the heart, not just this challenge in the brain. So it seems like it's pretty important to you to touch them emotionally somehow.
Yeah. Which is not unlike music, not unlike movies, not unlike anything that's relevant. And my show is that. My show is, make sure the magic is the best it can possibly be, but it can't end there. And it's like you name a famous artist that you care about, usually you'll find that, it's multi-level communication ideas.
Yeah. Well, it was really creating a whole new art form, if you will. Magic being just really a subset of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to convey.
Thank you for saying that. And I think it's good. And it hopefully inspires other people to do the same, because that's the right way to do it. It is.
So I want to talk about process a little bit here. So you've got a new concept, somewhat framing of a storyline, an illusion or two or three. There's a lot that happens from concept to a show. I'm assuming not just months, probably years. Can you talk about some of the steps that are involved, including the team that you work with? How do you go about that?
Well, I'll give you one example, a gigantic example. I want to do okay, I've done all this stuff, a lot of people are doing my things, which isn't great. People taking your material, and it's flattering in one way, but kind of sucky in the other way, because the amount of time you spent on those little details that can be just lifted. A guy in Spain doing my show, pretty much word for word, doing my show in Spain, threatening to come to Broadway with the show. Big star. And he's doing all my material. It's crazy. So what do? You say, okay. You think back and you say, what can I do? What what's different that's not copying myself or replicating what I'm doing again? And I thought back to my childhood, and what did I like? And there was a character called Topo Gigio. You can Google it, on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was a little puppet character. And it was magical because he moved in a very lyrical way. And America was in love with this Italian mouse on the Ed Sullivan Show. So maybe I'd love to have a kind of a little character in my show. Okay, what am I going to do with that? So we started with that idea. And I said, well, maybe it's an alien. I tried to come up with a story. Let's start working on animatronics and puppetry. They could do magic. It was an alien. What could I do of scale? So the spaceship came out of that, to make a big spaceship appear as part of that. What should the story be? And my parents both just passed away a decade ago, but closer to when we started working on this thing. So, okay, I would like to, make things right with art, say goodbye to my father in a very profound way. So that became the story. It's all about family that everybody relates to. We all are going to lose our parents, unfortunately. So I had to make that right. So that was a story that meant something to me. Write what you know. They say, write what you know. Well, I knew that. I knew I never lost a family member before. Now I lost both of them. I'm an orphan now. So the story is going to be about that. So you got an alien, you got a spaceship. You've got how do you make this right with your parents again? So now time travel. You got to be time travel. So all those things, a lot of stuff in the banquet there. And how do you make that a proper meal and make it make sense? And we did. And it took about 5 years of failure and people hating it, and with really innovative magic, but to tell the story right. Trey Parker helped me a little bit with some suggestions. Frank Darabont, who did Shawshank Redemption, helped me. These are all really good people who is like the best of the best. And they, contributed to this new form, really, which is the form of having magic and story. And there's that balancing act to have not too much story, not too much magic. And you learn that thing. And it was 30 minutes of my show. Is spaceships, dinosaurs, and parents, and spaceships, and aliens, I should say. So it took 5 years to kind of where it wasn't so bad. And you get a lot of strength reading other people's stories. Cabaret, Oscar-winning Cabaret was a disaster, the worst movie of all time. And then they fixed it, right? The head of Pixar, Ed Catmull, wrote a book about, when they make a movie, they get rid of directors, they rewrite, right? In his words, how do you make it suck less? And it becomes some really great thing. So I got a lot of inspiration from people who just struggle and finally succeed. I aim very high. When I was a kid, I read a quote that said, "You're only as good as you dare to be bad." And I love that. And I have a life of daring to be bad. And sometimes it is bad. But it's a journey to make something unique. And that unique journey is by taking those risks and finally fighting through it till it becomes reasonable for an audience to see.
Well, you have this mantra, the 3 Ps: passion, preparation, and persistence.
Which that's mine. I invented that one. Yeah, I think it's true. I think if you're lucky, and you have to be really lucky to find something you're passionate about, if you can find something you really care about, that's a gift, an amazing gift. It's not just, I want to be a singer, or I want to be something you're really passionate about, that you really know that you want to do and have to do. In acting school, they teach you, teacher says to you, you shouldn't be here if there's any other choices in your world. You shouldn't be here. If you have any ideas of doing another thing, don't be here, because you're going to have so much bad stuff happen to you and so much blockades and walls against success that you better be committed to this, or else so many people are going to take it. That's what you're taught in acting school. Quit if you're not really committed. So finding something you're passionate about is really, really important. It was for me. I knew I had to do this. Still today, when I failure, and finally we fight past it and it finally works. It's the same. It doesn't get easier. It gets not easier at all. But to be passionate about something is very important. So if that's a gift, you have that gift, that's great. And then preparation is really key. Know what happened. Everything that came before you, not to copy it, but to learn from it, prepare and know every single thing about what you're trying to do, what you're passionate about, know everything. You talk to Martin Scorsese, he will know every shot that existed, every shot from all the old movies that you can pull up, like like a computer file. It's amazing. Spielberg, the same thing. Songwriters who are really great. Not everyone, but a lot of them know who came before. The Billie Eilishes, they know all of the great music composers. They know it. It's not just from thin air. They know their parents taught them those things. So passion, preparation, and the last one is persistence, because it's not easy. It's like there's blockades every single time. You have to be persistent about it. So those are the three things that will work. It will work. That's the formula that does work.
So could I offer up a fourth P?
Please.
And this is not a P to be good. This is a P to add to be world class at your level.
Okay.
Which is, I wonder how much perfectionism is part of it. Because, your idea of preparation and persistence, David, I am guessing, might be a world apart from an average Joe out there. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know if perfectionism is one of the three Ps. That's what you achieve doing my three Ps. You have to not accept, okay, car companies spend millions of dollars just on, so the shutting the door feels like it has weight to it. Boom. Mm-hmm. Just the detail, the Apple model of everything they're doing, everything's just right. And just the feel of the box and the paper, everything's important, and that's perfectionism. But that comes from the other ones. I think it comes with it. And I drive people crazy sometimes. When things it's good enough, it's okay. I can't. So maybe you're right. Maybe there's a third thing.
Well, it's how high you hold the bar.
If I know it could be better, I know something's behind the thing that could be better, it'll be troublesome to me. And it's a curse. It's a curse because it's not fun. It's not fun. The end result is fun.
What I find interesting, David, is given the preparation, the persistence, the perfectionism, of course, my word, not yours, I find it sort of interesting that one of the skills you also have is this ability to think on your feet, which sort of surprised me, because I would have thought, quite the opposite, that these shows, by the time they go live, years in the making, they've been so well orchestrated, rehearsed over and over and over ad nauseum, that by the time you're performing them, it's almost just routine. But apparently not always the case. Things can go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. And I have a plan B and a plan C for those things to get past it, so the audience doesn't know. Sometimes they go really wrong. Nothing I can do about it. Imagine that. It's being funny and cute on stage. Behind me, they're setting up behind a curtain, something that could be disastrous if they don't do their job right. But I've got a really great team, and you have to be prepared for everything. And thinking on your feet is really part of it. If the ship was sinking, I'd be a good person to be next to you on the ship. I would. I'd jump into that mode of figuring out what to do.
Well, I remember like 20 years ago or so, I got my private pilot's license. And that's actually a lot of what you do is this contingency planning. So if this goes wrong, here's the backup system. Or if everything fails, have some kind of plan in terms of how are you going to come in for an emergency landing, where are you going to land, always surveying the landscape, if you will, to know what happens if things go wrong.
Do you still fly?
No.
Okay. But you loved it.
I wish I did.
But that logic, the Swiss cheese of layers of Swiss cheese. So if the hole's over here in the Swiss cheese, you have enough layers of it, it'll fill in those holes. So it's a solid thing. Nothing's going to get through it. And I've really modeled a lot of my show out of aviation technology, in the sense that, or protocol, I should say, aviation protocol, where, you have a checklist and the other person has to say the word, but back and forth, so this things are done. In the world of aviation, it's life or death, literally, not just for you and your passengers, but everybody below you too. It's the most regulated industry in the world because of the risk. And I try to use that in my show to have my people kind of have that same ethic of double checking things and having a plan B. What can go wrong? What are we going to do?
I've got one more P I'm going to throw at you. Personality. Because you can be a brilliant magician, but not everyone has the charismatic personality to captivate audiences, the way you do.
Well, thank you. I don't, again, that's all part of finding who you are. And that's who you are as a salesperson, not in entertainment, as a salesperson, as a teacher, as as an inventor, anything that's going to communicate ideas or present yourself. You have to find that truth, who you really are. There's a lot of people that came before me that got away with a lot of, personality things that were fake, and they didn't last. And the reason they didn't last is because it wasn't really, it was a veneer. Longevity is based on having an actual belief in what you're doing. So you're showing your real true self in some way. And all the greats show, maybe not, it's maybe a sculpted piece of themselves. Maybe it's a cultivated piece of them, but there's something got to be really real in who you are. We like Jennifer Lawrence because she's like real. Wow, I believe her. You know what I'm saying? We like George Clooney because he's real. We like Tom Cruise. We believe that he's really passionate about what he's doing. We know that passion is there. Going back even further, the Clark Gables and the Sinatras and the Barbara Streisands. Then there's the Milli Vanillis who are not true. It's a very short meal. Done. You moved on. So to last, I lasted a half a century.
That's why you're on this podcast.
I've lasted because I don't get everything right. I make lots of mistakes, but I learn from them.
I mean, this time, 5 decades into this, and you're doing, I don't know how many shows in Vegas. What is it today that keeps you going?
Same thing. It's like finding something unique that can move the art forward, to move the audience experience forward, to maybe inspire people to be the next generation of dreamers. It's, for me, it's fun. Doing new things are fun. Doing hard things are fun.
The Library of Congress, they named you a living legend for your creative contributions to society. I think there have been like 80 living legends in total over the course of history. So just a small sampling of these people, because I don't know how many of the audience are familiar with this, but Muhammad Ali, Madeleine Albright, Ray Charles, Bob Hope, Billie Jean King, Yo-Yo Ma, former Congressman John Lewis, Martin Scorsese, Tiger Woods, on and on and on.
Humbling, right? It's humbling to think about that.
Well, to be honest with you, it's pretty humbling to even be talking to somebody on a list like that. So I guess the question for you is how does that make you feel to be amongst that kind of prestigious company like that?
Well, your imposter theory comes, imposter syndrome, hits you a bit. But something, after the moment of kind of like, oh, am I really worthy of that? I got to keep moving forward. Let's keep going forward. Let's see what else. Maybe I'll get it right someday.
Do you still have imposter syndrome? Like, is that still something that you feel like one day you're going to wake up or someone's going to discover who the heck is this guy?
It's not waking up. It's the fact that, is it really that good? I don't know. I mean, but you can't hang on to it. You have to really just try to keep getting it right. That's it. And anybody that I look up to has the same thing. Not every day. I don't wake up thinking that I'm not worthy every day, but there's definitely times for sure. Yeah. And the answer to that is what else can we do? What else can we do? Let's figure it out. And everybody that has inspired me has that inside of them.
Well, you mentioned this Buddha earlier, and I assume that comes from your vast collection. I think you've assembled the largest museum of magic in the world. It's not open to the public.
No, we do exhibitions. We take things out of here and do exhibitions. So it is for the public in that sense. People coming here. There's so many secrets to all this stuff that we don't reveal the secrets, and it's very kind of touchable and tangible. It's not behind glass in most cases, but we do exhibitions around the world with this material. It's really kind of inspiring to do. But this is an archive for filmmakers, scholars, technicians, engineers, historians. People that come here and to kind of take all these amazing giants on whose shoulders I stand upon and tell their stories to the world.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not going to want to pick a favorite child, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If you could only have one, I'm going to take everything away. The museum would be just one item. What's left?
I think There's a bunch of them. There's a couple Houdini things here. Robert Houdin, who I told you is the guy that Houdini took his name from, he had a levitation that he invented that kind of started it all, this ethereal levitation. He also layered his magic. The rage was ether at the time. Ether was a chemical that would put people to sleep. And in 1840s, I was like, wow, really? A chemical puts people to sleep. And he took that idea of ether, which was in the ether of the public, and he used that as the excuse, the framework of levitating. It had nothing to do with levitation at all, but he levitated his son with ether as the excuse. And the gimmick for that was 20 years ago, was put into my hand. The 1840s gimmick to do this levitation, this ethereal levitation is from my hand. I started to weep. Flash forward 20 years, and now it's in the museum here, hidden in a safe. But that's probably my favorite thing here of all these things. There's tons of Houdini stuff, tons of Keller, Thurston, female magicians, amazing history of female magicians like Adelaide Herman and Del O'Dell, and the movies there's a Marion Stephanie, who is in old Hollywood movies producing cards beautifully, producing cigarettes, I should say, when cigarettes were healthy for you at the time. That's what they thought. All these, the world of female magicians is an amazing thing that we're kind of championing here to show how important it was and is today.
Just so you know, I've added it to my bucket list.
Yeah, you got it.
And you probably feel really bad and not let me check off one of my bucket list.
All right, no problem. Then.
Okay. David, I always end the show the same way, which is this podcast is called The Art of Excellence. So what does that word excellence mean to you?
And nothing's ever finished. It can always be better. Always, in my show, I do 15 shows a week, no days off. I take weeks off during the year, but no days off during any week. So I'll do 3 shows on Saturday and 2 shows every other day. And they say, why? How is it interesting for you? How do you keep it fresh? And one of the techniques is dissecting what I'm doing and find maybe we can change this and change that. Little nuances, little pauses, or a new piece of technology to change something. So I think nothing's ever finished. Everything's a work in progress. Whether you're a actor, or a writer, there's certain finalities, when you deliver your movie, there's always the director's cut that they get a second shot at it, or a recut of the thing. And you see that they have the same mindset as me, that we're constantly trying to make it. When you kind of committed to a television special or a film or movie, try to get as good as you possibly can, but still not done. And making things excellent is a process that never ends.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was just reflecting on, I'm a big tennis fan. So just, I think it was just last week that Federer announced his retirement. And so there are a lot of endeavors in life where, age just sort of forces your hand. But so cool to see that you can do what you do at your level for decades upon decades, if you allow yourself to never stop learning and continue to reinvent yourself, which you have. So pretty amazing to see that.
Thank you. I think, in every industry, in sports and in physical things, there's going to be an end. But I think you can still stay in the game, contribute in some way. You can still keep, even that word, you can make it better. Keep coaching and make somebody else better and just pass that torch. And I chose magic because I could be an old man doing magic. I can. I can't go over Niagara Falls every week, but there's a way of making it fresh and exciting, no matter how old you are in my world. So a writer can do that. A singer can do that. A communicator can do that. And I think I chose wisely for me.
Yeah, I think so too. David, like I said, lifelong fan. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Would love to see you in person one of these days.
See you at the museum.
I'll see you at the museum. Thanks, David. Hey, thanks for listening. Okay, don't go yet, please. 2 favors. I ask simply 2 favors. One, if you could please download the iTunes app. You could do it on your phone. You can do it on the computer. Take 60 seconds and leave a review. It means a lot. 2, you can find my episodes on several social media sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Find the one that you like the most. Find the one where you tend to have a lot of friends and followers, And if you could please either share it in the case of Facebook and LinkedIn, or retweet it on Twitter, that would mean the world to me. So those are the two asks I have. I love putting together this podcast. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.